we know, by the way, that pretty much everybody who advised Joe Biden on COVID was crazy, and they got everything wrong. And Rochelle Walensky, the former head of the CDC, has now stepped down, and they are now trying to pick a new head of the CDC. And this woman's name is Mandy Cohen. She's from North Carolina. Let me pause here for a second, because I know we got a lot of North Carolinians out there listening. If you look at the quote-unquote red states, right, North Carolina was alongside of Kentucky, and if you want to count Virginia as a red state, and there's a debate on that, right, but as a traditional red state, southern states, North Carolina and Kentucky were the two most restrictive traditional red states. And that is because both of them had Democrat governors. And we've talked about this, and I'll just give an echo. Daniel Cameron is the nominee to be the next governor of the state of Kentucky. And I know we're number one all over the state of Kentucky. We appreciate all of you. Make sure that you get out and vote this November, because Andy Beshear was wrong on everything related to COVID. And the state of Kentucky bore the brunt of the blame there. And you need to replace him. Roy Cooper is term limited out, I believe, the current governor of North Carolina. But they shut down, this is a border state where I live, right? We share the mountains there. They shut down North Carolina to a great extent. I mean, really way more than they did almost every other southern state.
Wait, you mean does that include Asheville, where I created quite the stir?
Yes, that's a great point. That is
quite the
Mr.
stir.
Buck Sexton. Was it Memorial Day last year?
4th of July weekend.
July 4th.
It was almost exactly. It will be coming up on a year ago. That's crazy when I think about how recent this was. The lunatics in downtown Asheville wearing masks in the stores with masks required signs on a gorgeous summer day. They're wearing N95 masks outside, inside, and I don't even remember this guy, some like health and fitness bro who's also a communist who told me that he can deadlift like 400 pounds or something. I want to be like, dude, I could deadlift like basically that much. Like, bleep off. Like, who cares? Like, that's not even impressive. But this guy freaks out at me, and then it turns into a national news story.
Yeah, I still remember I was down at the beach on the beautiful Emerald Coast of Florida, and it was July 4th, I happened to look down at my phone. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to check and see what's trending, and I saw that Buck was trending topic all over social media over his take on Asheville, North Carolina. So, you're right, perfect example how crazy things got in the state of North Carolina. Well, now the Biden administration is trying to put this woman from North Carolina, who helped to ensure that many of you North Carolinians were shut down, locked up in a way that did not occur for much of the rest of the South. They want to name her the new CDC director. And I just want to say this. Every single Republican should be opposing her elevation to a CDC director, because here's just a clip. As the North Carolina health director, here she is, I believe, laughing about the fact that she wasn't going to let them play football in her state. Listen.
Probably the person I called most was the Secretary of Health and Human Services in Massachusetts. She worked for a Republican governor but you know, when she was like, are you going to let them have professional football? And I was like, nope. And she's like, okay, neither are we. You know, it was like conversations like that. So, or I'd be like, so when are you going to think about lightening up a mess? They're like, next Monday. I'm like, okay, next Monday.
Are we going to let people make a living playing pro football? Ha, ha, ha. No, this is what they did to so many businesses out there, Buck. She was just laughing over the dictatorial power that she had and the fact that they had a total cabal of crazy scientists that they would get on the phone with and be like, are you going to let them go watch football? Ha, ha, ha. No, of course not.
This is so important, though, because tyranny, real tyranny, is duplicitous and capricious, right? A true tyranny is not a system where there are really strict laws for everybody. You could say that's a draconian system. You could say that's a harsh regime. But whether you're talking about the COVID era in this country or even a place like, North Korea today, there are very different rules for the people in charge, and they decide what the rules are based on a whim. And that's the worst kind of tyranny, because how do you deal with that? How can you, how can you prepare? How can you know? And that's why we felt it so much during COVID. They were making it up as they went along. They were addicted to power. Fauci and all the little Fauciites. She's a Fauciite, just like she's a smaller version of Anthony Fauci on the national stage. They were making it up as they went along, and they looked at you and said, this is about, Clay, I was disinvited from a wedding because I wouldn't get vaccinated to go to the wedding. Like, I got disinvited from a friend's wedding, and I was like, sorry, not doing it. And then New York City said you can't even go to your job unless you get a shot, which fortunately the J&J shot was like,
they
might as well just...
They destroyed the J&J shot. Your
the
COVID
J&J
shot doesn't exist.
Was the closest thing to a sugar placebo. I know for a lot of you out there, it's like, if you didn't get the shot, you're high-fiving all the other non-shot people. But in the tyranny, like Clay, in the tyranny regimes, though, our consolation prize in places like New York and California is if you didn't have any choice, meaning you were going to get fired and you couldn't go anywhere, the J&J was the option for everybody who's like, this is crap. I don't want an mRNA vaccine, but I'll just do this so they leave me alone.
Yeah, and look, the overall concept here is I just think that clip is the way that so many of these public health authorities thought about you if your business was deemed non-essential. And by the way, the very idea that we allowed a phrase like non-essential business to ever exist, every business is essential to the owners, to the people who use that business to make sure that they can pay their mortgage, put their kids in school, take care of them. That was and is still infuriating to me. And so I think anyone involved in getting all those things right, you cannot allow this woman to be elevated and praised based on getting the signature element of public health wrong 100%. We got to cut the cord.
My feeling on this is that for anybody who was in a position of leadership during COVID, everything you need to know about that person's character and leadership abilities by how they handled it. And now that's not to say that nobody was perfect, because nobody had perfect information. So I want to be very clear. Whether you're talking Donald Trump or talking Ron DeSantis or pick your politician, nobody was perfect.
This is a good question. When do you think it's fair, because I have an answer, when do you think it's fair to start judging somebody on their response to COVID?
I think so I can say, and this is funny because I can go back in my Twitter timeline.
Same for me.
By May of 2020, I was like, this is all garbage.
That's my answer.
You are all insane. Like anybody who doesn't see this now. By April, I actually got dragged more on the internet for this than anything else I ever wrote. I thought we should reopen for Easter Sunday fully, which was in April of 2020. And I got dragged and I wanted to kill grandma and the whole thing. So certainly by April, you should have known something was up. And by, if you're in a position of leadership and, or, doing what we do, looking and reading the news all day. And by May, it was clear. And anything beyond June, I don't want to hear it. Anything, we had to do. Nope.
Yep.
Nope. You go in the negative column, I think, starting around May based on COVID. So I said this. I think you get everybody, to be fair, I think you give people a 60-day grace period.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know. I think so. We can apply that to anybody, whoever you're talking about. Beyond that, though, once you get in the summer and the fall of 2020, all fair game. Everybody should have known by then. And the 2021 stuff was we're just full on, Kim Jong-un, authoritarian, crazy stuff going on. But I also think, Clay, that one of the reasons we haven't seen, the reckoning we've talked about so much.
Yeah.
One of the reasons the reckoning hasn't happened is because, and this is a tough one. And I just talked about the J&J thing, right? I talked about how in New York City, people like me, you had no choice if you want to do your job. And I hated it. And it was gross. And it made me mad. But they made so many people complicit in it by mandating it.
Yeah.
So that I think that's part of it. Even if you knew, I knew wearing a mask was pointless and stupid and and I knew that the whole time. The masking thing, I knew just based on previous research and epidemiology that exists, that masking was a pure signaling mechanism and a political tribalism. But they made us all do this stuff. And so there's a part of us, I think, that a lot of people, we just want to move past it because we were all in some way forced to be complicit with the ugliness. I mean, almost everybody masking up on a plane. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so challenging. And also, it comes back to what we talked about earlier. The people who think they're so smart would have to acknowledge that they got everything wrong. And not only did they get everything wrong, the so-called science-y smart people, all of the red state Rube Trump voters that they hate, guess what? They were right. It's not only that you're wrong, it's about who's right. Let me ask you a question about your computer. If it crashed this afternoon, what would you lose on it? How many photos? How about all the files? If you rely on a laptop or desktop computer, your worst nightmare is that computer crashing and not being able to access your files, your emails, your photos. The solution is having a good